Hey guys, Mark here. I hope you're all well. In today's video, I want to talk a bit about storing lacing needles. Lacing needles, for many of us, are a vital tool for working with paracord. As such, it is really frustrating when you misplace a lacing needle or even worse, lose it. As such, it is a good idea to use a container for storing your lacing needles. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I address this problem. So here you can see a lacing needle container that I whipped up. It holds quite a few lacing needles. It accommodates even the longer ones, such as this jumbo lacing needle from Tandy. As you can see, it comes in two parts. The base for this container is a cigar case, which are used to prevent the cigars from drying out. Now, I've covered both parts using pineapple knots, and this makes for a nice needle case. I really like it because it is metal, so it protects the lacing needles quite well. And with an addition of a decorative knot, it is also quite nice looking. Now, if we take a look at the cigar tube or container, they are usually about the same size, the size of a cigar. So the length is about 6.5 inches. The diameter is about 3/4 of an inch. This smaller part of the container is about 3 inches in length. And finally, this larger part or longer part is about 3.5 inches in length. Since the two different parts of the cigar container are of different lengths, we're going to need two knots of different lengths as well. So the first one is going to be a bit smaller, and this one is going to go onto this 3-inch part of the container, and the larger knot is going to go onto this 3.5-inch long part of the container. To tie the two covering knots, I would recommend using some sort of a cylindrical object to tie the knot onto, and then transfer it onto the cigar container. Now in my case, I'm going to be using a broomstick handle, but you can also choose to use something like a PVC pipe, for example. Now, you're going to want to have a rubber band as well, just to hold the standing ends of your cords. When you're choosing the item that you're going to tie the knot onto, choose one that's slightly larger in diameter than your container. So the container is about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, so this broomstick handle is going to be about an inch. Just so that I can easily slide it off of my mandrel and onto the container. Now you can alternatively also choose to tie the knot directly onto the container, whichever route you prefer. The next vital supply for this project is going to be paracord, more specifically Paracord 550. Now I'm going to address the specific lengths for my paracord a bit further in the tutorial. But for now, I would like to mention that you're going to need two different colors of paracord and that you will need to gut your pieces of paracord. So by gutting it, we are removing the inner strands of our paracord, which is going to make the wrap or the covering knots lay flatter, which is much preferable than just using paracord with the inner strands left in. A lacing needle is also something that I would recommend. Since we are making a lacing needle container, it is safe to assume that you already own one. But you can tie the two covering knots even without a lacing needle. It is just more comfortable to do it with one. Finally, the last two items that you will need are something to cut the cords with, as well as a lighter to melt them. With these supplies ready, let's begin. The first covering knot that we're going to tie is going to cover the longer part of my cigar tube. This one is about 3.5 inches long. The mandrel that I'm about to use is about 1 inch in diameter. For this diameter of a mandrel, I'm going to take about 7.5 feet of paracord. This is a bit more than you're going to actually need, but it is better to be safe than sorry. So 7.5 feet of gutted paracord. I have attached a lacing needle onto one of the ends, and I'm going to attach the other end, so the standing end, under the rubber band, like this. With this done, we can begin tying. To start tying my knot, I'm going to grab my paracord and wrap it around my mandrel 3 times. So once, twice, 3 times. I'm going to come around here on the right side, then start wrapping over my previous wraps. This time I'm going to travel towards the left side. So over once, creating an X shape, over twice, and over 3 times. Then I come around on the left side and travel in between the cords traveling towards the right side. Once I pass the last cord here on the right, I'm going to take my working end and I'm going to travel the opposite of this cord. So you can see that this cord is starting its sequence with an over 1, so I'm going to start my sequence under 1. Like this. Then I'm going to go parallel and do the opposite of what it is doing, so basically an over 1 under 1 sequence. So over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, and finally over 1 on the left. Then pull through the rest of your cord. So after I pulled through my cord, you can see that I exit on the left side with an over 1, with which we finished the previous sequence. I'm now going to take my working end and I'm going to travel alongside the standing end and double it up. So all I'm going to do is follow the standing end and make a double version of it. So I start under, over, then under, over, under, and so on. I'm going to continue this until I reach the right side. Once I exit on the right side with an over 1, I'm going to re-enter into the knot, again doing the opposite of what this cord is doing that is traveling towards the left side. I'm going to go alongside it and do the opposite of what it is doing. So I start over since it is going under, so over, under, then over 2, since it is going under 2. So over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, and finally over 1 on the left. So we now have our standing end doubled, and we're going to split the pair by traveling in between the two parallel chords and do the opposite. So we can see that we have the two chords going under the first chord. So I'm going to start my sequence over 1, then continue under 1, then over 2, since the two chords are traveling under 2, then under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, and finally over 1 on the right. Now, since we exit with an over 1, we're going to start our next sequence under 1. We're going to follow this chord yet again and do the opposite of what it is doing. So we're going to start under 1 since the chord is going over 1. So under 1, over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, and so on. All we're doing is a simple over 1, under 1 sequence, splitting the two parallel chords. We exit on the left side with an over 1, then place our working end right next to the standing end, like this, going under 1, and with this we have finished the base knot for the longer part of our needle case. At this point, I'm going to work in the rest of the slack out of my standing end into the knot in order to loosen it up a bit. Then I'm going to do the interweave. After loosening up my knot a little bit, I'm going to take the second piece of paracord, again gutted, 7.5 feet long. I'm going to take the standing end and place it onto the left side of the first standing end, like this. Then I'm going to take my working end, with the lacing needle attached onto it, and I'm going to start my sequence under 2 on the left side of my standing end. So under 2, then I'm going to continue my sequence with a simple over 1, under 1 until I reach the right side. So over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, and so on. And since I am going to tie a type 2 pineapple knot, I'm going to exit the knot here on the right side with an over 1. At this point, I'm going to pull through the rest of my cord. As I have mentioned before, we exit on the right with an over 1. Then we're going to travel on top of the next bite, so on top of it, and re-enter with an over 1. So over 1, then under 1, then over 2 in order to split the next pair, so over 2, and under 1, over 1, under 1, and over 2 to split the next pair, then under 1, over 1, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 2 to split the next pair, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 2 to split the next pair, then stop with an under 1. We do not exit the knot here on the left, but stop just before with an under 1. Then we pull through the cord once more. We stopped the previous sequence with an under 1. We're going to start the next sequence with an under 1 as well. So this is what you get. We finished the previous one under 1 and we start the next one under 1 as well. Then we continue over 1, under 1, over 2 to split a pair, then under 1, over 1, under 1, over 2 to split a pair, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 2 to split a pair, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 2 to split a pair, under 1, over 1, under 1, and finally I exit on the right side with an over 2. Then I pull through the rest of my cord. After finishing my previous sequence over 2, I'm going to travel on top of the next bite, like this, then re-enter over 1. So over 1, then under 2 to split a pair, and over 2 to split a pair, then under 1, over 1, under 2, over 2 to split a pair, under 1, over 1, under 2, over 2, under 1, over 1, under 2, over 2, under 1, over 1, under 2, over 2, and finally under 1. Just like before, we do not exit the knot on the left side, but stop just before with an under 1. We finished the sequence under 1 and we're going to start the next one under 1 as well. Like this. Then we continue over 1, under 2, over 2, under 1, 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 over 1, under 2, and finally over 2 on the right side. After finishing the previous sequence with an over 2, I'm going to travel on top of the next byte and re-enter over 2, then under 2. Then continue over 2, under 1, over 2, under 2, 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 over 2, and finally under 1. Like this. We can now continue by starting the next sequence with an under 1 as well. Like this. Then over 2, under 2. Over 2, under 1. Over 2, under 2. over 2, under 1, over 2, under 2, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 2, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 2, and finally we exit on the right with an over 2. We again travel on top of the next as well as last byte, and this time we're going to re-enter with an under 1, which is a bit different than the previous passes. So under 1. Then continue a simple over 2 under 2 sequence until you reach the left side. So over 2, under 2. Over 2, under 2. Over 2, under 2. At the very end of our sequence, we continue over 2, then under 1, under the standing end of the first chord. Like this. Then we're going to place our working end next to the standing end of the second chord. Like this. And with this we have tied our type 2 pineapple knot. After tying the knot, it is time to prepare it so that we can transfer it onto the cigar tube. The only thing that we actually need to do is to work on our working ends a bit because they are a bit close to the edge. Because they are coming out right next to the edge, they are prone to slipping out. So if we cut them here, and they slipped out, it would ruin our project. So what we can do is either go right back into the knot where our working end is coming out. So just go here and under the knot and come out the other end. The other option is to simply go under a few sections and come out where the standing end is coming out. For example, here. And you could cut the end here as well, and it would be more securely tucked in the knot. After taking care of the two working ends, we need to transfer the knot onto the cigar tube. So we now did the long end, and I highly recommend that you tighten up the knot with this top part on the outside of the tube. It closes up quite nicely and decoratively. Now, before you transfer it, there is one thing that you can do in order to prevent the wrap from slipping off of the tube. This is to wax it. By waxing the tube just a little bit, you're going to create quite a bit of friction in between the wrap and the tube. This is going to hold your wrap very firmly. Now this isn't absolutely needed, the waxing only helps. You can tighten up the wrap very tightly onto the tube as well, and that will work just fine. After transferring the wrap onto the long end of the tube, you're going to want to tighten it up. Tightening is always done by pulling in the standing end first, so like this, then running the slack out of the working end. So you go through the entire knot and tighten it up slightly. Then you do the other cord as well, starting at the standing end and working out the slack out the working end. You will need to tighten up this wrap 2, maybe 3 times to get a nice look out of it. The last step for this side of the cigar tube is to roll the knot, then trim the ends. So I take 2 pieces of wood, I place the tube in between, and I roll my wrap just to make it sit a bit better. This is going to give your knot a much flatter look, which is much preferred. For the slightly shorter part of the cigar tube, I'm going to use a slightly shorter covering knot as well. The setup for tying the knot is going to be very similar to the previous one. So I have a broomstick handle about 1 inch in diameter. I have placed a rubber band onto it to hold the standing ends. Then I'm going to need 2 pieces of paracord, again gutted, so the inner strands were removed. Each of these pieces should be at least 5.5 feet long. I would recommend taking a few inches more just to be safe. You're going to also need a lacing needle for tying the knot. I'm going to start tying the knot by taking the standing end of my first piece of paracord, and I'm going to place it under the rubber band. Then I'm going to start by making 2 wraparounds around my mandrel. Like this. I came to the bottom side here on the right, and I'm now going to travel back to the left, going over my first wrap here on the right, and over again here on the left, creating 2 X shapes. Then I'm going to come around to the bottom again, and travel in between the wraps going towards the right side, like this, so in between, and over here on the right. Then I'm going to take my working end. I have a lacing needle attached, and I'm going to travel the opposite of this cord, traveling parallel to it. So I'm going to start under, then over and under, and over and under, and finally over. Like this. I now exit the knot here on the left, and I'm going to travel under the standing end, Then I'm going to travel parallel to the standing end and double it up on the left side of it. So I start under, like this, then over, under, over, under, over, and finally under. I'm now going to start my sequence by following this chord. So I'm going to start under, then over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, and finally under 1. Like this. Then I'm going to pass over the standing end, and I'm going to split these two parallel chords by traveling between them and doing the opposite of what they're doing. So I'm going to start under 1, then over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, and finally over 1 on the right. Then I'm going to split these two parallel chords, again traveling between them and doing the opposite of what they're doing. So it's going to be a simple under 1 over 1 sequence. So I start under 1, then over 1, under 1, 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 and over 1. Then I place my working end right next to the standing end, and with this I have tied the bass knot, which is again a long 4-bite Turk's head, but a bit shorter than the one that we used previously. After loosening up my knot a little bit, by working in some of the working end, I'm going to continue by taking a second piece of paracord, again 5.5 feet long and gutted, and I'm going to place the standing end under the rubber band and onto the left side of the first standing end. Then I'm going to grab my working end, and I'm going to start a sequence of under 2, then continue a simple over 1, under 1 sequence. So I went under 2, then over 1, under 1, 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 and exit with an over on the right side. Then pull through your chord. We finished the previous sequence with an over 1. We're now going to follow the next bite on top of it and re-enter with an over 1. Then continue under 1, over 2 to split a pair, under 1, over 1 under 1, over 2 to split a pair, and under 1, over 1 under 1, over 2 to split a pair, under 1, then over and under. Just like with the previous knot that we tied, on the left side we do not exit the knot, but we stop at an under 1. We're going to start the next sequence traveling towards the right side with an under 1 as well, like this. Then continue over 1 under 1, over 2 under 1, over 1 under 1, over 2 under 1, over 1 under 1, over 2 under 1, and finally over 1. After exiting on the right side with an over 1, we're going to travel on top of the next bight, then re-enter the knot with an under 1, like this. Then continue over 1 under 1, then over 2 under 2, over 1 under 1, over 2 under 2, over 1 under 1, over 2 under 2, over 1 under 1. We do not exit on the left side, but stop just before. We're going to start the next sequence under 2 in order to split a pair. Then continue over 1 under 1, over 2 under 2, over 1 under 1, over 2 under 2, over 1 under 1, over 2, under 2, and over 1. Like this. Then travel on top of the next bight and re-enter with an under 1 again. Like this. So we went under 1, then we continue over 2 and under 1, over 2 under 2, over 2 under 1, over 2 under 2, over 2 under 1, over 2 under 2, over 2, and finally under 1 on the left. And again, we do not exit the knot. We start the next sequence under 2, then continue over 2, under 1, over 2, under 2, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 2, over 2, under 1, then over 2, under 2, and finally over 2 on the right. We're now at our last pass, and we again travel on top of the next byte, like this, then start the next sequence under 1, then a simple over 2 under 2 sequence, so over 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, and so on until you reach the left side. We finish the sequence traveling over 2 and finally under 1. At this point, what we're going to do is place our working end right next to the standing end of the second chord, traveling under 2. And with this, our second knot is tied. Before we transfer the knot onto the cigar container, we need to secure the two working ends. If we left them like this, they would be prone to slipping out after we cut them. So the two things that you can do are either work in the two working ends back into the knot and out on the right side. This is very secure. Alternatively, what I like to do is simply go back into the knot where I came out. So back into the knot, and come out right next to the standing end of the same chord a bit deeper into the knot. Like this. If you trimmed the end here, it would be much less prone to slipping out. Then the second working end can be done exactly the same way. So right where I come out of the knot, I go back in, and I come out next to the standing end a bit further into the knot. Like this. So this is all the preparation that we need. Now you may remember that I used some wax just to increase the friction between the container and the knot. This is optional, but I do recommend it. Otherwise, you're going to need to tighten your knot very firmly to prevent it from slipping. And finally, before you transfer the knot, make sure that this top side, which doesn't have the standing ends, is on the outer side of your cigar container. This just wraps it around a bit more nicely. Finally, remember to tighten, starting at the standing ends and working out the slack out of the working ends. After tightening the other part of the needle case container, all we're going to do is roll it. Trim the ends and your project is complete. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. It has been quite a long one and it did require quite a lot of work on my end. But I enjoy making these, especially because I get a lot of kind words from you guys as well. Thank you very much for joining me and see you next time.